Okay, so this is the second video in the attachment styles training. During the last video I talked about why we're doing this training, but I also talked about the three different historical figures who were very influential in developing the attachment styles, and that was John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, and Mary Main. By no means is that an exhaustive list, because there are a lot of different theories regarding attachment and attachment styles, and there are a lot of different psychologists and professionals who have had a big influence on the development of the attachment styles and attachment theories. But I just highlighted those three because those three were very important, influential people in developing this. So if you want to learn more, you can go online and learn more about attachment styles and how they were developed and the different people that contributed. But those are the three main ones I wanted to look up and giving you a brief synopsis today. So now we're going to move on past the historical aspect of understanding where the attachment styles came from, and we're going to delve into talking about the four different types of attachment. I do want to give a disclaimer at first, because as you hear these four different attachment styles, you obviously are probably going to be thinking of some people, oh yeah, I know people that fall into that one, I know people that fall into that one. But then you might be thinking, well, there are some people you know that don't fall into one, or this might be not be an exhaustive list, or you might have some questions like that. So an important thing to note when you are looking at the four different attachment styles is that the four different attachment styles do not take into account a child or a person's specific personality. So for instance, you might have a child that is very introverted and very shy, and so they might come across as avoidant at first, and you might kind of have that presumption of them from the get-go, is that they might have an avoidant attachment style, but it might just be that they are introverted and shy. They might have a really secure attachment style with those that they're close to, like their mother or their father or a sibling. So the attachment styles do not take into account the person's specific personality, and so that's important to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and talk about the four different attachment styles. The first attachment style that we discussed is secure attachment style. So I'm going to tell you what each attachment style looks like in a child and what that looks like in an adult, in the caregiver, and how they play off one another. So in a child that has the secure attachment with a parent, and the parent has the secure attachment style, the child is going to use the caregiver for a safe base. And we see this a lot in our kids that come home as they begin to develop attachment with their adoptive families. We see them start to use their adoptive mother or father as a safe base. So they'll go explore new things, but they'll kind of always keep their eyes on mom and dad and know where mom and dad are, or they'll come back to mom and dad and, put their hands on their knees, and they'll use them as a safe base while they're exploring new things. Another sign in a child of the secure attachment is that the child shows appropriate distress when the caregiver leaves. And you see this in the strange situation. Those children and mothers that had a secure bond and a secure attachment, when the mother would leave, the child would show appropriate distress in the caregiver leaving. It wouldn't be a full meltdown and tantrum and falling on the floor, but the child would clearly become upset and try and walk towards the door that the mother had just left out of. The child is also able to be comforted upon return, where in some of these that we'll discuss later, a child might go into that distress when the mother leaves, but be completely unable to be comforted by the mother once the mother returns. In a securely attached child, the child may be able to be comforted by a stranger, but the child's going to show clear preference for the primary caregiver. I kind of already talked about this, but a child with a secure attachment is going to be explorative. They're going to feel safe exploring and curious and learning more about their surroundings because they have the caregiver there as their secure base. A child with a secure attachment with his or her caregiver is going to trust in the caregiver to meet his needs, and the child is going to be playful and engage in play. In adults with a secure attachment style, are quick to meet the child's needs. They are sensitive to the needs of the child, and they are consistent in their care and affection for the child. So that is the secure attachment style. And then now we're going to move on to the avoidant attachment style. This can also be called dismissive, so you'll see those words interchanged, dismissive and avoidant. In children that have an avoidant attachment with their caregiver, the child has a low affect in regards to if the caregiver is engaged or not. They have a low affect towards affection. They treat strangers and caregivers similarly, where they won't really have a lot of distinguishment in regards to relationship and engagement with strangers and parent. The child may express a lack of attachment and low self-esteem by displaying negative behaviors. The child might be emotionally distant, where they don't engage in emotional play with a caregiver. And the child will be unsure of if his needs will be met or not by the caregiver. So that's the avoidant style. In adults that have the avoidant attachment style, they can be distant both emotionally and physically. They can be disengaged in times of close attachment activities or in times of distress. They might seem disengaged and just not as present either physically or emotionally. A lot of adults that have an avoidant attachment style will also be very uncomfortable in those kind of situations too. If they are placed in a situation where they kind of are forced to have some kind of emotional connection with somebody, they're going to be very uncomfortable in that situation. The third type of attachment style is ambivalent. This can also be called anxious, and it can also be referred to as preoccupied. So those kind of terms go hand in hand. So you have anxious, preoccupied, ambivalent. In children, what we see in children with ambivalent attachment style, the child does not use the caregiver as a secure base. The child seeks attachment and interaction, but can be resistant when it's provided. So it kind of goes back and forth where like, hey, he wants attachment and he's seeking attachment, but then when it's provided, he might resist it and push away from it. The child's not easily comforted. The child is not at ease with strangers. The child can be anxious, insecure, and angry due to inconsistency from the caregiver. And the child cannot rely on the caregiver to meet his or her needs. In adults with this type of attachment style, there's inconsistency. They can shift from being really sensitive and affectionate to being neglectful and uninvolved. The fourth attachment style is disorganized, and this is the one that Mary Main then added later on, that she was seeing this other group that wasn't falling into one of the other three attachment styles. So disorganized, in children what this looks like is that there's a lack of attachment. There's disorganized behaviors such as wanting interaction with the caregiver but not directly. For instance, in the strange situation, what you see is that the child will want interaction with the adult and will come towards the adult but will have its back towards the adult the whole time. So there's that desire for interaction but at the same time not. The child is unable to cope with stressful situations. The child has very passive behaviors. The child can be very non-responsive to the caregiver. The child is confused as to whether or not his needs will be met and is unaware of how to have his needs met. So, you know, a typical child with a secure attachment is going to be confident in that their needs are going to be met by their parent, and they know that if they cry, the parent's going to come and meet their needs. Where in the disorganized attachment style, the child doesn't even know how to have his needs met by the parent. Children from this category are seen to statistically have a higher prevalence of being from high-risk situations. So children who come from abusive homes, children who have substance dependency, you'll see a higher risk of them statistically falling into this disorganized attachment style. In adults with a disorganized attachment style, they can be very erratic in behavior. They can act frightened themselves or be frightening to others, and they can display passiveness or intrusiveness. They can go back and forth. Again, it's disorganized. It's not really knowing where they're at, not knowing if they're going to want to hug you 1 minute or if they're going to spank you the next. So it's going back and forth in this disorganized attachment style. So as I was going through these, actually before I go on, I've kind of reached my limit on this video, so I'm going to go ahead to the next video and we'll talk some more about the attachment styles.